Hello. So, in this video, I'll be describing how to write a very simple Hello World service using the Boomi Flow Java SDK. The Hello World scenario is not a very realistic one, but it should explain the common use case of how to install the SDK, spin up a skeleton service, and add a message action. I'll also show how to use ngrok to test the service while in development. Okay, first off, I'll be using the IntelliJ IDEA IDE here, which is the one you can see on my screen, which I highly recommend. And I also have a Java JDK installed and pre-configured. I'm using the JDK 10, but the Java SDK from Boomi Flow supports anything from version 8 upwards. I also have ngrok installed and configured, which you can get through your package manager if you're on a Mac or Linux computer, or from the ngrok website if you're on Windows. Okay, so let's create a new project. We need to tick this create from archetype because we'll be using an archetype. So add archetype. We need to use com.manywho.services as the group ID. The artifact ID is archetype. Make sure you spell it right. And the version is 2.0.0-beta08. The SDK 2 is still in beta, but it should be considered fairly stable. Click OK. Make sure our archetype is selected. Choose Next. So we need to choose a group ID. Usually that is your company's domain, but backwards. So I will use com.jonjomokai.services, and I shall call my artifact the Hello service. Choose Next, and then you'll have to give a project name and location. Make sure you choose a suitable location for these, and choose Finish. So now IntelliJ will create a new project. It will build the archetype and open it up for you, as you can see here. Now you might get a little banner down here which asks you if you want to enable auto import like this. Make sure you click yes or enable. Cool, so now we have the project. Let's try and run it just to make sure that everything's working as expected. So on the left here in the project window, expand all the way down till you find your application class. This is the main entry point to your service, so let's right click on it, choose run. Now IntelliJ will build the project and start it once it's finished. Cool, here we go. You can see it's logging some stuff, and now it says service started on 0.0.0.0 port 8080, which means it's running on our local machine's port 8080. So let's open up our browser and go to localhost port 8080. Now we should see this little JSON blob here which says could not find resource path. That's exactly what we want to see because there's nothing there right now. Cool. So now that we know it's working, let's go to a terminal and start up ngrok. So we want to type ngrok http 8080 to get it to start on port 8080. Now having ngrok is really helpful while your service is in development because it means that you don't have to keep redeploying it to an external place every time you want to make a test, make a change, do all of that stuff. You just restart your Java thing and use the same URL. So now we see that we get given this HTTPS URL from ngrok. We should copy that and log into our Flow tenant. So as you can see, I've already got a subtenant created here. I recommend using subtenants to separate projects out as it keeps stuff clean. So let's go to the Services tab here. Go to Install Service. Type in a name, let's call this one Hello. Paste in our ngrok URL. Click Continue. See there's an example configuration setting here that the archetype adds in for us. Click Continue. And now we have our service installed. It's pretty useless right now as it doesn't have any kind of actions or types or anything inside it. So let's fix that. Let's go back to IntelliJ. And we want to add a new message action. This message action will be really simple. It will just take a single string input for a person's name and a single string output to give back a nice hello world message. So actions in the Java SDK are made up of two parts. First part is the action metadata, which tells Flow all the information about the action itself, like the inputs, the outputs, the name and description. And the second part is the actual action itself, which is the bit that does all of the required logic. So let's create the action metadata. Let's right-click on our package, choose New Java Class. Now we want to call this one hello.helloAction. So this will create a new package called hello, because it's nice to have a project structure, and create a class called helloAction inside that package. Just click OK, and here we go. As you can see on the left, we've got a package called hello and a class called helloAction. So for the SDK to pick up this action, or the action metadata as this class is going to be, we need to add a few annotations. So this first one will be for the action metadata, and it's called action.metadata, which is nice and handy. So let's add it here. It'll ask us to import this, so let's do that. As you can see here, this annotation needs a name, URI, and summary. So the name, let's just call it say hello. The description, give it a nice little summary, sorry, it's called, not a description. Let's say gives back a nice hello message. And finally, the URI. So the URI is like a unique identifier for Flow. The SDK uses it to generate the action metadata, and no two actions in the same service can have the same URI. Under the hood, it's actually the URL that Flow calls on your service, but we don't really care about that here. So let's give it a URI of hello/say hello. And that's the action metadata sorted out. So we want to give it some inputs. Now the SDK doesn't really care where you have your inputs, but at Boomi Flow we like to structure our service inputs and outputs and put them inside the action itself, just so they're all together. So we'll create a static inner class here. Let's call it inputs. And we'll create one for the outputs too. Cool. So, as I said before, we're going to have one input, which is a simple string. So, let's create a field. It's going to be the name, so let's call it name. And we'll also need to generate a getter so that we can actually get the name out inside our action. So, let's go to code, generate, and generate a getter. So for our inputs, we'll also need to tell the SDK that this class and all the fields inside it are actually inputs. And there's a handy little annotation for that too, and it's called action.input. It has three fields: name, content type, and required. By default, all inputs are required. You can change that by setting this required field to false, but we want them as true. So we'll give it a name. The name is name, and the content type is content type.string, as we want it to be manifested as a string inside our flow tenant. Cool, so let's add the output now. There's also a handy annotation there, but let's add our message field first, and the annotation is action.output. Let's give it a name of message and a content type of string. Cool. So For the output, we'll need to give it a constructor so that we can actually set the value of this message field. So let's go to code, generate constructor. And this default one is fine. And we'll also want to generate a getter for it, for the SDK. Cool. So that's our action metadata done. Great. Now that the action metadata is done, let's create the actual action itself. So let's create another class inside this hello package and call it hello action command. Now this is the actual class that does the message logic. So in our case, it will display, or it will return back an output called message with our hello message. So this class will need to implement an interface from the SDK, which will give the class an execute method, which the SDK uses when the action is called from a flow. So let's make it implement that interface. The interface is called action command, and it's got a few generic parameters, as you can see here. The first is our configuration class. Now the service archetype did actually create us a configuration class here. We haven't seen it yet, but it does exist. So we can add that in. It's called application configuration. The second parameter is the action metadata class that we just created. So let's add it in. It's called hello action. And the third and fourth are the inputs and outputs respectively. So let's add those inner classes that we just created. Hello action.inputs and hello action.outputs. Cool, so now we've got those generic parameters, we can click this little action helper and choose implement methods. And choose OK, and here we go. Now I just like to clear this up, just to make it a little bit more readable. I like to import these as static imports, like this, and change this to request, just so that it all fits on my screen. Cool. So now we have a nice little frame for our action. So let's make it send back our nice little hello message. So in here, I'm going to create a new string variable called message. Now our message, we want it to say hello and then the person's name, which was given as the input. So create a new string like this, hello, and let's concatenate the input that we're given, which is the name. Now, so this execute class, as you can see, needs to return an action response with our outputs. So in this return, we'll change null to new action response. An action response has a few constructors here. We want this object outputs one. So we'll pass in a new instance of our outputs, which has one parameter here in the constructor, which is our message. So let's return our message. Nice and easy. Cool. So now we should be able to test this from using our ngrok from Flow. So let's restart our service so it has the latest code. So wait for it to build. And it's done. So let's starting up now. And let's switch back to Flow. Cool. So now we can go back to services, choose our service. Cool. So now we can update it. And this time we can choose preview actions and type now that we have an action there. So let's select that. And here we go. Here's our new action. Let's go back to the service configuration and click continue to finish installing that service. Cool, and now it's here. So let's build a flow that uses that service. Let's go to new flow. We don't want any service for authentication, so let's click continue. Let's call it say hello. Now first off, we need to go to shared elements over here and import the service so we can use it in a message action, like this. Now let's drag on a new message action, call it say hello. Let's add a new message action inside this. Choose our new hello service and choose our new hello action. So as you can see, it has an input and an output, the ones that we specified. So let's create a new value for the name. Let's call it name and let's pass in John Joe, because that's my name. Click save. And then let's add a new value for our message output. We can just call it message, that's fine. We don't need a default value, so let's leave it blank and choose save. Now let's apply that message action and save the message action map element. Now we want to add an outcome from our start element. Just call it go. And then let's drag on a step so we can see our actual hello message. Let's call it display message. And in here we want to insert a value and we want to insert our message value that we just created and set as our output. So just save that step. Add an outcome from our message action to our step. Just call it done. And let's click run. Let's see what happens. And here we go. We get a nice little hello John Joe message. That came straight from our service via ngrok. Now we can't actually see that, so let's prove it by adding a logging statement in here. So we want to use the SLF for J logger here. Let's create a new logger instance using the factory, and here we pass in the name of our class. Cool, so inside our execute, we will log an info log statement saying hello to parameter, and the parameter we want to give it is our name input. So let's restart our service. Now as we didn't change any metadata here, we don't need to reinstall or update the service inside Flow. We can just run our Flow again. And using the updated code, see it still says hello John Joe here, but in our console in IntelliJ, you can see it says saying hello to John Joe. So that's all for this video. As you can see, we created a new service based on our skeleton and our SDK. We added a new message action, our say hello one, and ran it using ngrok. Lovely jubbly. So that's all for this video. Thanks for watching. I hope it was useful. If you have any feedback or any issues with our SDK, you can find the SDK on our GitHub account. It's at github.com/manyhu. And it's pinned one up here, SDK Java. That's all. Thanks for watching. Bye.